Hello, crime fans. Andrew True Crime is with you. On a Friday evening in November 1998, Minnie Norrell watches her 15-year-old daughter Lisa walk into Ides Hall in Antioch, California, with a wardrobe bag and new black shoes in hand. One of Lisa's friends will soon be celebrating his quinceañera, and tonight there is a rehearsal for the big event. When Minnie gets back on the highway for a quick trip home to their home a few miles away in Pittsburgh, she probably feels an involuntary sense of relief, since they've reportedly arranged for a friend's parents to drive Lisa home after the party. This means that Minnie is officially free from motherly duties for a few hours. She can choose what to watch on TV, take a relaxing bath if she wants, and maybe even go to bed at a reasonable hour, enjoying the little luxuries that moms often miss out on. But she wakes up a little before 3 a.m. on Saturday, November 7th, with a feeling of restlessness she can't explain. She starts going over her head trying to figure out why she's so worried, and suddenly realizes that she didn't hear Lisa come home. Perhaps she was simply sleeping deeper than usual, but still Minnie would not be able to sleep until she was sure that her daughter was home safely and sleeping in her own bed. Minnie gets up and goes to Lisa's bedroom, sure that she is sleeping. But instead she sees an empty bed. She is unable to contact Lisa's friend's parents, although it is unclear why. After all, it's the middle of the night, and maybe she just doesn't have their number. So she immediately calls the police to report her missing. The police immediately begin to act, not writing off the fact that Lisa may have simply run away or gotten into trouble with friends. Jim Heron Zamora and Rob Selna of the San Francisco Examiner report that investigators aren't immediately ruling out such possibilities. But they trust Minnie's word that it doesn't look like her daughter and have found the circumstances of her disappearance troubling from the start. These fears only intensify as dawn breaks when they begin interviewing people who were with Lisa at the party or rehearsal the night before. The story they make up is ominous. Everyone agrees that between 10 and 11 p.m. something happened at rehearsal that upset Lisa so much that she ran out into the street at night alone and agitated. What exactly happened remains a matter of debate, as every witness the police spoke to has a different opinion. The East Bay Times reports that her aunt said Lisa was upset because she couldn't master a certain dance move. But other reports indicate that Lisa became upset when a certain guy refused to dance with her, or that another rehearsal member grabbed her inappropriately. But on the first day, it's not as important as where she went. It is believed that she probably attempted to walk about 4 miles home from the rehearsal. The only direct route is along the Pittsburgh-Antioch highway, which does not seem safe. I couldn't find a Google Earth image from 1998, but I read a description of that time from UC Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism students who wrote about the case. They described the stretch of road as poorly lit, with no sidewalk, gravel on either side of the road, a field on one side and sparse industrial activity on the other. So it's dark, she could have been hit by a car, and the place is quite remote and isolated. On Friday evening on the highway at 11 o'clock at night, the businesses are closed and Lisa was there all alone. Other than the fact that she was alone, there were few witnesses, except perhaps passing drivers who the police could interview if they knew they were looking for someone and remembered seeing anything. Almost immediately, volunteers begin posting flyers about the loss, and authorities scramble helicopters and mobilize a team of ground searchers, including tracking dogs. Soon the police find their first major piece of evidence on the side of the road, a black shoe. Investigators know that Lisa was wearing casual clothes when she ran out of rehearsal: jeans, a sweatshirt and sandals. But she had with her a festive outfit for the quinceañera and the shoes that Minnie bought for this. Finding a shoe is a bad sign, and it gets even worse when they find his pair just a few hundred feet from the first one. According to some reports, they also find a wardrobe bag containing her dress. The dogs may have picked up a scent in the area. According to the East Bay Times report, one of the dogs wanted to go to the Navland facility near the highway, but the dogs were barking there, distracting the trackers. All this happens on a section of the highway along which Lisa could walk home. Are there signs of a struggle? There was gravel on the side of the road, but nothing like that was reported. It is unknown how Lisa's things ended up on the road. It is unclear whether they were thrown from the car, or whether she lost them in the struggle while trying to escape. Despite all efforts, nothing more is found that day. When night falls, the search is suspended, but Lisa is never found. Meanwhile, word of her disappearance spreads, and tips and reports of her possible appearances begin to come in. 3 different people said they saw Lisa alive and well over the course of Saturday. Patrick Hogue of the Sacramento Bee reports that one person who knew Norrell claimed to have seen her on School Street in Pittsburgh at 8:30 a.m., and 2 others later at different locations. Captain Keith Schwitters, by the way, is the Antioch police spokesman. The next part of the story is just incredibly disappointing. It reads, although they knew the police were looking for Norrell, they did not ask her questions about her disappearance or the girl they saw. So it's possible that Lisa or anyone else was not interviewed or identified, and none of Lisa's supposed appearances were ever confirmed. In the first week after the disappearance, investigators conducted about 80 interviews, including a conversation with a boy identified as Lisa's boyfriend. His name was not mentioned in the reports, he was simply referred to as Lisa's boyfriend. This man was never mentioned again. There is also a brief mention of a boy from rehearsal who allegedly refused to dance with Lisa, but nothing more is said about him either. Several people took a polygraph, but apparently this did not yield much information, since the search continued without any specific direction. By midweek, divers were searching nearby wetlands, and a search team of 150 continued searching on land over the weekend. They included both volunteers and law enforcement officers. The divers found nothing, but the tracking dogs again led their owners to Navland territory. This time the dogs looked even more focused and purposeful. They may not have been distracted by other dogs the first time. They decided to seriously check out this area and soon realized why the dogs were so interested in this place. On the ground, among buildings and parked Navland cars, lay Lisa's body with dried blood underneath. No one noticed her body until dogs led a search party there that day. How is this possible? Perhaps she had not been lying there all this time. Her killer may have moved the body later, but the blood underneath indicates she had been lying there for some time. If she was killed that night, it's possible, but it remains possible that she was held somewhere for several days before she was killed and left there. Following an autopsy on Sunday, November 15th, the coroner concluded that Lisa had died of asphyxia 3 to 4 days before her discovery, but that it could have occurred on the night of her disappearance. She may have been held somewhere for several days before she was killed. Investigators aren't saying anything about sexual assault, but at the time her body was found, another witness came forward, a driver who claimed to have seen Lisa the night she disappeared, walking along the Pittsburgh-Antioch highway shortly before midnight for 11 hours. He also said there was another car nearby. But according to Charlie Goodyear and Tanya Shevitz, although he saw the car, he couldn't provide many details about it. He just drove by without stopping to help or anything. This, of course, does not look very good, but at the same time, how can an adult man offer help to a teenager in such a situation without being perceived as a threat? Everyone knows that guy who stops and says, "Hey girl, do you need some help?" This is weird. I don't blame him for not stopping. I understand the outrage in the reports, but I also understand his actions. If he had stopped and tried to help, it would have looked even more suspicious. So we didn't get much information from this witness other than a slightly extended time window. She was still walking along the highway around midnight. Meanwhile, another witness said he also saw Lisa the night she disappeared, also walking along the side of the highway. But according to this witness, Lisa was not the only pedestrian on this dark and lonely highway, although she may have thought so. She probably didn't see the man standing just 50 meters away, right in her path. According to the San Francisco Examiner, the man was described as 30 years old, 5 feet 11 inches tall, well-groomed, neatly dressed, with dirty brown hair and a heavy-set build. This witness helped investigators create a sketch that was published on Monday the 23rd. They didn't call him a suspect, just someone they wanted to talk to. I'm looking at this sketch and it's well done, but also a little vague, just like the description given. Despite requests from investigators, this person never got in touch, which looks a little suspicious, right? Everyone in the area knew about Lisa's disappearance. It was all over the news. And although the sketch is not the most detailed, someone must have recognized it or thought that they recognized it. They received dozens of calls from people who thought they knew the man, and 6 detectives spent long hours following up on each of these leads. They even looked for people in the area who fit this description. However, as November turned to December, they were no closer to identifying Lisa's killer or this man, whoever he was. It was a scary time in Pittsburgh. No one could understand why Lisa was targeted, other than to assume it was a crime of chance. So everyone started holding their kids a little tighter, afraid that something similar might happen again. And while some might have called it paranoia, it was justified because on December 5th, it happened again. The body of another young woman was found in an industrial area in Pittsburgh, almost exactly a month after Lisa disappeared. How close to where Lisa was found? It's hard to say. One source said it was a couple of miles away, while another mentioned it was just blocks away. Regardless, it was still close. Despite the proximity and similarities in the crimes, there were some significant differences. For instance, the second victim, identified as 24-year-old Jessica Frederick, had been stabbed, unlike Lisa. Jessica was also suspected of engaging in sex work, which Lisa wasn't. Additionally, Jessica was 9 years older than Lisa. While they weren't ruling anything out, Lieutenant William Zabachnik of the Pittsburgh Police Department theorized that the similarity in dump sites might have been a deliberate red herring to mislead investigators into thinking the cases were connected when they weren't. So he thinks Jessica's body was dumped there to confuse investigators? Not quite. He believes that whoever killed Jessica chose a similar location to mislead them into thinking the cases were connected. Investigators quickly zeroed in on a suspect in Jessica's murder who had no connection to Lisa's case, a 50-year-old cab driver named Muhammad Ismail Nias. He had a romantic history with Jessica. Ryan Kim reports for the Sacramento Bee that when investigators visited Muhammad's apartment the night her body was found, they found one of the doors ajar. Concerned about his well-being, or at least claiming to be, they entered the apartment. What they found didn't look good for Muhammad. A bent butcher knife along with a sponge and a sock that appeared to be stained with blood were in plain view. The next morning they returned with a search warrant, seized those items and sent them for testing. It's unclear where Muhammad was during all this, but investigators eventually found him and brought him in for an interview. His explanation muddled the anticipated results. He said the knife was bent because he used it to try cutting through some nails. A very unusual excuse. And the bloody sponge and sock? He admitted it was blood, his and Jessica's, but not from a violent confrontation. He claimed they had been injecting heroin together at his apartment, using the sock as a tourniquet and the sponge to clean up. So these must have been relatively small amounts of blood? Probably, though there's no specific detail in the reports. Both had a history of heroin use, having met at a treatment center 4 years earlier. But Muhammad's claim doesn't hold much weight. He quickly tries to divert suspicion, telling investigators there's a more likely suspect, though he doesn't know this person's name. Muhammad says one of Jessica's clients attempted to kidnap her the previous month, handcuffing her in his car before she managed to escape. Remarkably, this isn't fabricated. Other sources confirm Jessica had reported the incident, though it's unclear how thoroughly it was investigated at the time. So, are investigators considering that the same person killed both Jessica and Lisa? Not really. They haven't completely ruled it out, but it's not their leading theory. Lieutenant Zabachnik insists there's no evidence linking the cases. They remain focused on Muhammad and Jessica's case, and since he has no connection to Lisa, they assume the cases aren't related. They're convinced Muhammad is responsible for Jessica's death, given the numerous suspicious coincidences. Meanwhile, tips about Lisa's case lead them to two locals with extensive criminal records, 24-year-old David Michael Henneby and 39-year-old Gary Lee Walton. Both are placed under surveillance. On December 15th, while monitoring David and Gary, Contra Costa County faces a double shock. First, a 38-year-old woman is found severely beaten in a Bay Point porta potty. She is suspected of being a sex worker like Jessica and is rushed to a hospital, where she survives but remains severely injured. She describes her attacker as a Hispanic male driving a dark Monte Carlo, which doesn't match the description of the man seen on the night of Lisa's disappearance. But the nighttime conditions make any description uncertain. Before noon that same day, another woman's body is discovered in the same industrial area, behind the Pittsburgh-Antioch Highway. This victim, a woman in her 20s or 30s, is fully clothed with some blood on her face but no clear cause of death. She is identified as 32-year-old Rachel Cruz. Although Rachel has no criminal record related to sex work, her mother suspects she might have been involved in it to support her substance use. When Rachel's photo was shown to local sex workers, they confirmed they recognized her. 2 days later, on the 17th, her autopsy revealed she died from manual strangulation and smothering, according to Charlie Goodyear's report for SF Gate. Investigators also found her purse and shoes about a mile from where her body was discovered on the Pittsburgh-Antioch Highway. This seems like more than a coincidence. Are investigators considering that Lisa's killer also killed Rachel, given the similar causes of death? Surprisingly, no. Charlie Goodyear notes that despite the similar causes of death, investigators believe the two women were killed differently. Lieutenant Zabachnik suggests that Rachel's killer might have placed her shoes near where Lisa's were found to mislead investigators. Zabachnik believes there are 3 separate killers. He says, "We have 3 individual homicides that occurred that lead to no evidence that they are connected. We're certainly not ruling out any connection, but they are not leading in the same direction. This theory seems improbable given the small community and the short time frame between the murders. It feels like something out of a Criminal Minds episode, not real life. Moreover, there's the unnamed surviving victim, adding another layer of complexity. If Zabachnik only talks about 3 killers, where does this 4th victim fit in? To test Zabachnik's theory, investigators take bold action. On January 6th, they arrest Gary while he's driving through Antioch. They don't need to arrest David since he's already in the Contra Costa County Jail on domestic violence charges. Eric Brazil reports for the San Francisco Examiner that David menaced his wife with a pistol on November 25, 1998, hit her on the head, and threw her to the floor, injuring her knee. The wife recorded his threats, capturing quotes like, "You think that when I stabbed you in the neck it was bad. You just wait. And you want to call the cops on me, but you're going to die. They're never going to catch me. But know this." David has been incarcerated since December 4th, which means he couldn't have participated in any attacks after Lisa's murder. This supports Lieutenant Zabachnik's theory that the cases might not be related. Despite the rushed timeline, investigators hold a press conference to present their theory, taking a bit of a victory lap. They claim David was driving Gary's car, with Gary as a passenger when they saw Lisa walking alone on the highway. They allegedly abducted her, made advances, and killed her when she rejected them. On January 6th, investigators search 5 houses, 5 vehicles, and conduct 42 witness interviews. However, on January 7th, Gary is released. Ray Delgado reports that the anticipated evidence didn't materialize. Lieutenant Zabachnik expresses disappointment but insists they must follow the evidence. Though released, neither man is entirely ruled out. Zabachnik suggests they may have evidence implicating David but not Gary, and notes David's incarceration prevents further harm. The next day, another woman's body is found in a ditch near Pittsburgh. This victim, 27-year-old sex worker Valerie Dawn Schultz, was both stabbed and strangled. Her autopsy on January 9th couldn't determine the cause of death. The weapon used to stab her isn't linked to Jessica's murder weapon. In March, Muhammad is formally charged with Jessica's murder but isn't considered a suspect in the other cases. Investigators struggled to connect the cases due to a lack of physical evidence. None of the sex worker victims, including Valerie, showed signs of sexual assault or had semen for DNA testing. The status of Lisa and the surviving victim in this regard remains unclear. In 1999, which is where this story takes place, having that kind of evidence would have been critical. Unfortunately, they just didn't have it. In March 1999, a scandal emerges involving a Contra Costa County fire captain named Dwayne Shoemake. Back in September 1998, Dwayne was arrested for repeatedly sexually assaulting 2 minors. The charges were quietly dismissed in January 1999. Initially, not many people outside those directly affected noticed. However, in March, prosecutors informed the victims' families that the charges were dropped as part of a cooperation deal with Dwayne. Dwayne's sister-in-law is also the mother-in-law of David Henneby. Charlie Goodyear reports that Dwayne told authorities that David Henneby had confessed to abducting Lisa, holding her for several days and doing terrible things to her. At first, Dwayne's victims and their families accept this information. However, as months pass without any charges against David, the community marks the 1-year anniversary of Lisa's death with no progress. Larry Cook, the attorney for one of Dwayne's victims, states in November, "The continued victimization of these girls is the fact that no arrest in the Norrell case has been made, and law enforcement is unwilling to come forward to account for their actions." Understandably, the victims' families are furious. They feel betrayed that no charges were filed against David for what he did to their daughters, and then no action was taken in Lisa's case either. As time passes, frustration grows. In 2001, the charges against Muhammad, the only charges filed in any of these cases, are dropped, and he is ruled out as a suspect. The reason for this reversal is not detailed in the source material, but it raises suspicions. The setup never quite seemed right, like the conveniently open door and concern for Muhammad's well-being. Regardless, the charges are dropped, and Muhammad is no longer a suspect. This pattern of going hard on suspects without enough evidence, then backing off, is seen repeatedly in these cases. Time continues to pass with no progress in Lisa's case or any of the others. However, in August 2009, a jaw-dropping story makes national news. The arrest of an Antioch couple, Philip and Nancy Garrido, who abducted J.C. Dugard. This case consumes the national press and draws attention from investigators in the Pittsburgh PD, Antioch PD, and Contra Costa County Sheriff's Office. Once again, this became major national news, and everyone in the area was aware of it. Speculations arose about whether Philip Garrido could be linked to not just Lisa's death, but also those of Jessica, Rachel, and Valerie. The possibility gained traction when investigators learned that Philip lived near Lisa's family, and he had worked in areas where some victims were found dumped. Daniel Terry from the Contra Costa County Sheriff's Department noted that bodies were discovered at locations linked to Philip's work. Lisa's mother shared that a close relative of hers was Philip and Nancy's neighbor, further fueling suspicions. Despite initial hopes, Philip and Nancy Garrido were not definitively ruled out, but no evidence connecting them to Lisa's or the other women's deaths was found. The cases once again went cold. In 2018, on the 20th anniversary of these deaths, the Pittsburgh PD reopened Lisa's case under the lead of Lieutenant Jacob Stage. They re-examined forensic evidence using updated technology, but it did not lead to any breakthroughs. Lisa's case, along with those of Jessica, Rachel, and Valerie, remain unsolved. Lieutenant Stage entertained the possibility that a serial killer targeting sex workers might be responsible, suggesting Lisa might have been mistaken for one due to her age and circumstances. Paul Holes, known for his work on the Golden State Killer case, expressed his belief that at least one serial killer was involved in some of these deaths, although he couldn't confirm if one person was responsible for all. He hinted at unique details in the crimes that were not disclosed publicly. Despite the involvement of experts like Holes, including potential use of investigative genetic genealogy, no definitive answers have emerged, suggesting either a lack of DNA evidence or challenges in identifying a suspect through genealogy techniques.